When Mojang first announced the summer drop, I made a ghastling. Now that the full update's here though, I decided I would make the Hapy Ghast. So stick around and I'll show you how I made a needlefelt Hapy Ghast. To start this Minecraft themed craft, I first need to make a block of wool. Unfortunately in real life, wool comes like this. So I first need to make a cube. I can do that by taking the wool and first forming a ball. Once I have that ball, I can continue felting into one side of it in order to make a flat edge for the cube. By felting into the same spot, it'll flatten the edge. I can then flip it over, do the same to the other side, flip it over again until each different side is flat and mostly cube-like. Once I have a cube, you can see it compared to the ghastling. It's not quite big enough, and it needs quite a bit more bulk. To do that, it's pretty simple. I just have to add more and more wool around it until it becomes the right size. Luckily, that shouldn't take too long. After almost an hour of just adding wool to this cube, I ended up here. Now, it's very hard to make a needlefelt thing that is too dense, but I think I pretty much got there, because I made a brick. I did have a chance to test something though. What does a real-life block of wool sound like? Interesting. Anyway, now that I have this cube, I can actually start working on the Hapy Ghast. I'm first taking a gray wool to make the eye. Now I have to admit, I enjoy what the Hapy Ghast looks like. It's an interesting mixture of the old school Minecraft. The texture is very blocky, therefore I'm trying to make the two eyes pretty blocky. But the mouth is curved, unlike a lot of other stuff in Minecraft, because it's the higher res texture. I actually really enjoy the new high res texture a lot of the animals have. After the eyes and mouth, I started with a lighter gray to add in some of the extra details, like its eyebrows. And once the eyebrows were in, I started adding in these lines it has on the side. I'm not fully sure what they are. What I do know, however, from looking at the texture, is that from the top to the bottom, the lines slowly go from the front and then drift to the side of its face. Once they were in place, I could give him a quick once-over, and he already looks a lot like a Hapy Ghast, but I need to add the lines to the other side of his face. Now that they're finished, I can begin working on the gills. Now something interesting I noticed is when they're younger, the gills are a pink color, and I guess over time the white flesh of their body kind of covers them up. I also noticed that the gills fall in line with the weird lines at the front, so I'm not sure if they're actually connected. Once they're all finished, once again, I need to add them to the other side. Beautiful. And with that done, I can begin adding the lines on the top of his head. I'm not fully sure what these V formations are. Even though Minecraft is adding more and more dense textures, I'm still not too sure what this is meant to be. Is it like a flap? Is it just a color? What do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. Either way, they appear on the texture, and I actually like how they look, so I added them to the Hapy Ghast, and he's almost finished. Now technically, he does have the faint outline of tears, but I don't want to add that. What I am going to add though is some legs. Taking some wool and then rolling it into a tube, I'm going to do a similar thing to before. By first starting out by making a cylinder, and then cubing off the cylinder, by felting down into one face and then the other. Once I finished one of the tentacles, I then made a few more. I made 3 big, medium, and small to give a bit of variation in his tentacles. Now I just have to attach them. The process is pretty simple, you just stab it in like anything else. Having a dense base to work into actually helps out a lot, because there's a lot of wool for the new object to get stuck into. And once it was properly stuck, I had to add the others. Just as I was about to finish, disaster struck. As I was felting, the needle tip broke off inside. You can kind of hear it. Pretty simple to get out though. I took some pliers and come on, almost there. Like a bee sting. There we go, all better. With that finished, I'm done. I made a Hapy Ghast. But the video keeps going because I'm also going to be making the saddle. Apparently it's called a harness. Doesn't matter. Let's get started. For my crafting stockpile, I have some brown felt as well as some green felt that I'm going to use to make this saddle. A harness. It doesn't matter. Let's get cutting. I'm taking a strip of green to make the cloth area around the lower end of the saddle. And once I have that, I can check how it fits. Now, it does fit almost perfectly. There is an issue though. I want to add in the ruffles that appear on the texture, which means I'm going to need a bit more room, so I just doubled it. I'm going to take these two strips and felt them together, lay them over each other with a bit of extra headroom, and just make sure they stick together. This is basically how felting's done anyway, so it does make an actually pretty decent connection. I'm fairly certain it's not going to come apart on me, so I can start adding in the trim along the bottom. The different colors of saddle have different colors of trim, and I actually really enjoy all of them. I kind of chose green because I had that color felt, which is a bad idea because it means it's a lot harder to green screen this guy out in the future, but it's fine. Testing out the ruffle, I'm folding it over itself, and then along the top edge, I'm going to felt down just so it stays there. Would it have been easier to do this if I had just sewn it? Possibly, but I know how to felt, and I don't like sewing as much. Anyway, I aimed to have 2 ruffles per side. Luckily, doubling the length was exactly perfect because it meant, with what I had already, it reached all the way around the guy. I added an extra bit towards the front to connect the 2 halves, and I had a pretty nice looking bottom half of a saddle, a harness, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm laying the brown felt on top of the Hapy Ghast just so I can make sure it's at least big enough to fully cover it. Once I cut it out, I'm then going to take a Sharpie and draw out roughly where I'm going to actually make the cuts. Looking at the texture sheet that I found, that I hope is still correct by the time the update actually releases, it has a lot of intricate curves that make it a bit more interesting than just a brown square. Once the marks are down, I'm taking the brown square, folding it in half, and then I'm going to cut along the lines I just made. That way, it should be symmetrical on both sides. Now, I think the Hapy Ghast harness is actually very interesting looking, although I do agree it does look out of place in Minecraft. The higher res texture is definitely a bit weird, especially compared to the regular saddle. Now, I don't hate it, but I do think that maybe some of the older textures should be updated in the future. I then added a gray outline around the saddle, or at least where the saddle's going to be, because it looks like there's some metal involved, even though in the crafting recipe, there's no iron. The magic of Minecraft crafting, I guess. Along the back, there's some extra brown that I'm going to cut off, and I'm going to use that to make the 2 straps that are eventually going to hold the stirrups for this harness. Cutting that bit in half, making some back bit that I'm not sure what it is, but it's on the texture, so I'll put it there. With these finally attached, I can begin working on the extra texture details on the saddle. For example, there's a lot of these brown areas on it. I'm assuming it's meant to give it more depth, even though logically, the top of a ghast is flat. But I guess, from the curves on the actual model, it's meant to imply that the saddle puffs up a bit. I'm not going to do that. This is already taking a while. And with the stirrups added, I can now add the top part of the saddle to the lower part of the harness. Oh, I guess that's why it's a harness, because the top's the saddle and... yeah. Anyway, I'm putting it over the Hapy Ghast, gently stabbing the corners in, just to make sure it'll stay when I take it off. And then once that's done, I'm going to take it off the Hapy Ghast, and then actually felt it down along the corner in order to make sure it will stay together. This wasn't the best move, because you can see some green popping out of the top, so I'm instead going to cover that area fully in the darker brown. All he needs now is his goggles, and I can make that by taking some blue wool. And with its light blue wool, I can lay out a rounded off square to act as a pane of glass in the goggle. I'm making sure to work on this a lot making all the wisps actually go into the middle so it's sturdy. Once it's sturdy enough, I'm then going to start to take some white wool and add in some highlights going across the glass. Once that's there, I can make two. And with 2 panes of glass, I can begin to make the goggle part. I'm making the rims of these goggles by using a dark brown wool and felting it around the edge. With one done, I can do the same to the other piece of glass. And with that finished, I can now start to make the actual goggles. So felting down some brown in between the 2 pieces, just so they have something to anchor to, I can take a bit of the brown felt I have to use as a strap for the goggle. But first, I'm going to fold it in half just to make sure it's a bit sturdier, because this part is actually going to be able to move up and down. Once that's finished, I can attach the goggles to the strap by just felting down mainly in the brown part, just because I don't want to mess up the blue that much. Now that I'm finished with that, I can finally attach the goggles to the actual harness. I put the strap of the goggle in between the brown and green felt and felted it down, which means it should be in there, pretty sturdy. Turning it right side out again, it looks like our harness is finished, which means all I have to do now is attach it to the Hapy Ghast. Here's the Hapy Ghast with a harness, and here is his little brother, the ghastling. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, I hope you liked the video, share it, subscribe, all that stuff. I also have an Instagram and a TikTok. I mainly use the TikTok because no one cares about my Instagram. Anyway, if you follow me there as well, I'm much more likely to make your requests faster if you do it on multiple platforms, just to let you know. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time.